Okay, folks, sorry to interrupt your conversations. One of the rules about speaking in public is you never begin with an apology. And I'm going to do an apology for the fact we're 10 minutes late starting, and it's all the fault of these guys. We're moving up a step in gear. So just a few words as we start about sparkling wine in general. Now this is, the wine world at the moment, in 2023, according to the OIB, is producing about 10% more wine than people are drinking. So most categories of wine are sort of in trouble because there's an imbalance between demand and supply. There's too much supply, not enough demand. The exception over the last couple of decades has been sparkling wine, which has grown enormously. And I think it's now a very, very exciting category. And I think one of the big changes has been that in the past, sparkling wine was dominated by one region, Champagne. So you had Champagne, and this Champagne cast this huge shadow. And what happened is every other sparkling wine was seen as a sort of cut price imitation of Champagne. And I think that's begun to change. You know, it's something that I've seen sparkling wine regions worldwide beginning to assert their own identity. And while it's inevitable that people in an emerging wine region would do a comparison tasting with Champagne and say, well, we're producing something that's in the peer group of the best Champagnes, I think now people feel that they don't need to do that so much. Because sparkling wine is, it's got its own local character. And if we think about sparkling wine globally, well, of course we've got Champagne. We've seen the emergence of Prosecco, which is now huge. We've seen Franciacorta, Italy's sort of traditional method of sparkling, wine style. We've seen England grow to 4,500 hectares now. From when I was starting out in wine in the mid '90s, occasionally as a novice in wine, we go and visit some English wineries, and the wines were usually there were sort of little cottage operations, and the wines tasted of damp summers and disappointment. They weren't very good. But now sparkling wine scene in England is fantastic. It's really exciting and dynamic. You're seeing Australian sparkling wine, New Zealand sparkling wine doing well. A real success story has been in South Africa with Captain C, previously known as Method C, but now they like to call it Captain C. Really dynamic category there that's been growing and some fantastic wines. And I think the real surprise for me over recent years has been seeing the changes in Spain with CAVA. And I think this is why I've described this talk as, exploring a quality revolution in 6 wines. Because in the past, CAVA had a real identity issue because it used to be the cheapest traditional method sparkling. And when you start playing at the bottom of the market, the problem is you end up getting in trouble because people like you because you're cheap, and then you have to stay cheap, you have to cut prices. Inflationary pressures, and you end up with a product which is not what you'd like it to be, but you're driven there by the volume, and you have to supply the volumes to make money. But I think this has changed quite a lot in recent years, and I hope that these wines will demonstrate that. And what you've got is you've got a region. Well, this is the other complicated story. We'll come to that. You've got a region plus other little bits of regions that has ideal soils and climates for producing really good quality-based wines. You've got varieties that do really well, most notably Xarel·lo, or the varieties that we're dealing with, that are making really good base wines for traditional method sparkling. And then you've got the incentive now that people are being able to get a little bit more money for their wines. They can invest in the vineyard, they can invest in farming the right way, and that's another story of CAVA in recent years, and produce something that's really interesting. So, on your sheet, you've got a QR code, and the QR code is also here. That will give you the tasting booklet and all the information that you need should you choose to access it digitally. So a little bit of history. And I think this is fascinating because I think what happened with CAVA was that CAVA emerged as a sparkling wine region in much the same way as Rioja emerged into what it is now today as a result of phylloxera. The first traditional method wines were made in 1872. So what happened is Champagne and Bordeaux got hit by phylloxera, which you're all familiar with, I'm sure. This aphid that attacks the roots. And suddenly the vines all started dying. It was a massive crisis. So phylloxera hadn't reached Rioja, hadn't reached Penedès. So the enologists came from France to Spain. And in Rioja, they started using small barrels, they started making the wine in the way that you see the large factory wineries in Rioja now. That's all a result of the Bordeaux enologists turning up in France with a sort of 15-year window to make a lot of wine, to make up for the fact that Bordeaux wasn't able to make wine. So Champagne had a similar problem. So Champagne experts came to Penedès and found that this is a place that can make base wines that are ideal for making traditional sparkling wines. So they brought the technology, the know-how, and that's how the first sparkling wines were made in Penedès. So we have that there. So using Xarel-lo, Macabeo, Pauletta, we ended up with these characters, these sparkling wines with a character of their own, but really high quality. And so this carried on. So CAVA as a name didn't appear until 1959. Previously, if you look at the old sort of marketing posters and everything, it would have said Spanish champagne. So champagne was used for this term, which is kind of common in the world. They did that. So in California and Australia, fantastically, they describe their wines as Chablis or Burgundy or Bordeaux. So they misappropriated the names, and so the sparkling wines were known as champagne. This was until '59 when the word CAVA was first used. And the term CAVA was then protected in the 1970s. So the other information here, I think, really is that over the last few years, there's been a reclassification. The terms for how these wines are described and classified has been modernized, and I think it's a really exciting time for the region at the moment. So we're looking at traditional method sparkling wines. It's a picture from one of the cellars. I'm sure you all know how traditional method works. So we're starting off with a base wine. You want the base wine to have some personality, but maybe not too much personality, good acidity. Then you put it on the lees. You do a secondary fermentation in the bottle. Time on lees, obviously very important. Then disgorge it, add the appropriate tirage with maybe some dosage as well, and you've got the wine. Fermented grape varieties, we do this very quickly. The three traditional ones, Macabeo, Xarel-lo, Arolada, all with their own distinct characteristics. All of them are of merit, but I think a lot of the real geeks who love CAVA and like CAVAs that age for a long time tend to be quite keen on Xarel-lo. And then we've got the newcomers, well, we've got the Chardonnay, and then we've also got Malvasia. Red grape varieties, Monastrell, Pinot Noir, Grenache Tinta, Trepat, all have their place, they all play a role. Distribution, this is quite interesting. So the most widely planted is Macabeo with around 14,000 hectares, then Xarel-lo, then Arolada. Chardonnay, 2,600 hectares. Then we've got the red grapes, which are not quite as widely planted as the white ones. We've got Grenache Tinta, 1,800 hectares. Trepat, 1,200. And then Pinot Noir, Parent, which is Malvasia, and Monastrell, just 82 hectares. So overall, for the Dio CAVA, 38,000 hectares, which is kind of like, I think that's sort of in line with what you've got in Champagne. Picture of the typical vineyards in Penedès. This one is showing one of the things, in the past you might have seen bare earth there. This was taken in May last year. Now what you're seeing is an increasing shift towards organics, and also not just organics, it's also thinking about, because organics you might see bare earth because it's sort of tilled, but increasingly people are thinking, well, what can we do in terms of having things growing in the vineyard? Regenerative approaches, because when you have things growing in the vineyard, you have soil microbial life, because plants release around 20 to 40% of their photosynthase into the soil to recruit microbes to help their roots grow and develop. Lots of mycorrhizal associations that increase the ability of roots to take up water and nutrients. And this is, this idea of just having a crop plant, the vine in a vineyard, and then bare earth. People are seeing this as problematic. And it's also problematic in dry areas because although you might think having the bare earth means that you can avoid competition for water, what happens is when you have bare earth, when the water comes, it doesn't infiltrate well because the soil structure is not very good. And also then what you get is you get erosion, and also the soil is not very good at retaining water. When you have more organic material in the soil, it's actually much better at retaining water. So having things growing there, they increase the water infiltration ability, and also they help retain that water once it's there. So lots of people are thinking about this there now. So organics is taken off, and it's just a really beautiful wine region for growing wine grapes. This is another picture of another vineyard there. You see that this is quite a dramatic landscape. This is one of Paraspeltis vineyards up in the hills. So, trends. So I mentioned organics. CAVA is kind of all sparkling wine appellations is leading the way in terms of organics. And the number of bottles that are organic produced each year from CAVA is in excess of 32 million a year. So that's a growth rate in the last year of 24%. So, if you go to Penedès, which is the main region for CAVA, you'll see that this is actually quite a good place to grow vines organically. It's quite dry during the growing season, so that really does help. And the other trend that's increasing at the moment is towards rosé CAVA. So let's talk about zoning. This is the kind of confusing thing I think about the brand of CAVA, is it's not restricted to one geographical location. Yet, pretty much all CAVA that we will drink comes from one geographic location. And that's the Comtats de Barcelona, which is around here, so Penedès area. So you've got Barcelona, Tarragona. Pretty much all of CAVA that you come across comes from here. But there's about 5% of CAVA that comes from elsewhere in Spain. So it creates a complicated messaging. But you need to know that. And actually the first wine that we'll be trying will actually be one that comes from Valencia. So here we've got the Zona de Requena, and that's Valencia there. We also have CAVAs coming from Rioja, so Logroño, the Val de Ebro. We also have some coming from I'm trying to say this right, Almendralejo. I think that's kind of close. Is that close? Yeah. Almendralejo, which is near Badajoz, which is on the border of Portugal. So if you kind of go drive that way, you get to Lisboa in about an hour and a half if you drive really fast. But it's good modern roads in Portugal as well, actually. So the quickest way to get there would be to fly to Lisbon and then go to Badajoz. But there's some that come from there as well. So what we've got is we've got some different regions there, and we have to bear that in mind because that's a kind of historical artifact, but it complicates the messaging a little bit, admittedly. So this is a picture just showing some of the regions here. So within the Comtat de Barcelona, we've got 5 different sub-regions here, and then in Rioja there's 2 different sub-regions. Apart from that, the other 3 areas have got their own regions. So this is kind of like the technical details. Pretty much everything you'll find in CAVA comes from here. And really, as I said before, it's a good place to grow wine grapes to make base wines for sparkling wine. So let's get towards the segmentation. Segmentation is really important. So at the bottom, we have what's called CAVA de Guarda. And this is the more commercial end of the CAVA market. So this is stuff that's aged on lees for a minimum of 9 months. So base wine, bottled with some sugar, aged 9 months on lees, then it comes to market. This can be really good, fruity, attractive stuff, but it's not the stuff that gets geeks excited. Then we get to Cava de Guarda Superior and Reserva, and that's minimum 18 months. Then we take a step up towards Grand Reserva, which is minimum of 30 months. And this is where a lot of the action is happening at this sort of level, where you expect the wine is spending around 3 years on its lees. This makes a really interesting style of colour. And then we get to the very peak here, which is the Guarda Superior Paraje Calificado. And it comes with this little sticker here. And there aren't so many of these. This is colours from specific vineyards. And this is a very exciting category. I'll just move to it. Yeah, so this needs to spend at least 36 months on these. It will probably spend a little bit more. It has to be like a single vineyard, maximum yields of 8 tonnes a hectare, manual harvest. It can only be made in brut types, so brut, extra brut, and brut mature. And it's made on the estate. It's like the ultimate sort of single vineyard expression of carbon. And there aren't so many of those. Let's see where it is. So going back, the other thing this is really interesting as well, it's called Elaborador Integral, and that's the sign for it there. And currently we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 producers who are able to use this seal. What that means is they're doing everything. So they grow the grapes, harvest the grapes, they make the base wines, they then bottle the wines for the second fermentation, disgorge them, and they market them. So everything is done by the same producer. And this is kind of cool. This is like, you'd expect them to be more than 14 of them. Yeah. You can see the CAVA model is often quite dispersed. So some people will harvest the grapes and sell them to wineries. Some people harvest the grape, make base wines, sell the base wines to wineries. Some of the big producers don't actually harvest any grapes themselves at all. So this is kind of like the quality level that I think is really important and should grow. And I think there's a lot of producers who are looking to do this, who basically do everything themselves. So this is kind of like the estate model for carbon. Going back to the seals by quality. So Guarda is the one 9 months least, but it's the simplest. Guarda Superior Reserva, this is minimum 18 months, and that's the sort of like silver platinum coloured label. Then we get to the gold label, which is Grand Reserva, and that's 30 months minimum, and this is kind of cool. And then Guarda Superior, which is the one I mentioned, which is the kind of like a single vineyard, super fancy example. So now I think we should turn towards the wines. We've got 3 poured already. We can pour the other 3 now as well. So we taste it. And we're beginning with this one, which is the Dominio de la Vega. And if you want to get a picture of the bottles should be...
They were on the table here.
Go on the table there. Yeah, that's good. Maybe if you bring them across this table so people can see it and show them as well. This is 2019 vintage. This is a Brut Reserva Especial, so Brut. And the thing to note about this is it comes from Valencia. So this is one of the colours that doesn't come from Peredas. It's a blend. It's a blend of Macabeo, 30 years old, and Chardonnay, 17-year-old vines. And the key thing here, obviously you've been to Valencia, it's down the middle of Spain, it's hot, right? Key thing is the vineyards are at 750 metres. So altitude is the thing that gives you the ability in this area to make really good base wines, plus limestone and clay soils. Other things, the residual sugar, dosage is 6 grams a litre. pH 3.24, so quite normal for sparkling wine. TA 6.4, 12.5% alcohol. This one spends 24 months on these. And also, I should say that if anyone's got questions or comments, please do stick your hand up or shout out. That's fine. one of those annoying presenters who tells you what you should be tasting. But I might share my opinions. I think this is a rich, really rich, toasty expression of cava. I think it's got deliciousness. It's got a nice sweetness to the fruit. It's kind of big and reassuring. What do people think about that? So thumbs up for that?
Oh, yeah.
What do wineries actually mean by especial? They only do it in special years.
I think it's an undefined marketing term. So
Yes.
they use that within their own range to
Yeah.
indicate things that may be of a slightly higher level. That's
Okay.
There's no legal.
Okay, there's no legislation behind it.
The legal things would be things like Grand Reserve or Brut
Yeah.
or Extra Brut.
Yeah.
Yeah. 750 meters high up. Yep. Yeah, so generally speaking, 750 is that sort of relatively close to the coast is quite high. You may get central plateaus that could be higher than that, where it's, but generally speaking, that will moderate quite a lot of the heat. So Penedas, you're looking at maybe 300 to 500 meters vineyards, so that's a little bit higher.
Jamie, I heard from one CAVA producer that he had family records showing that around the turn of the 19th century, a lot of grapes were trucked up to Champagne and made into champagne to replace what was not growing because of phylloxera at that time. Do you think there's a fair amount of 20th century champagne that's actually CAVA grapes, in the same way as Algeria probably appeared in a lot of Bordeaux and Burgundy?
Well, I mean, I have no basis to answer that question from any evidence, but obviously a wine at the time, there was a sort of latitude for bringing out of region grapes in and vinifying them, and then being kind of not too discreet about the origin. And obviously the AOCs in France didn't start emerging until the 1930s. So I imagine before that there wasn't the same legal framework guaranteeing authenticity of origin of wines. So you've got, so especially with sparkling wines, it's always been a little bit of a muddy thing going on. You look at Germany now, Sekt. I don't think many consumers in Germany realise that most Sekt is made from imported bulk wines. Obviously, it's not illegal to do that. So it would be illegal to put a country of origin on them. But with sparkling, there's often been a latitude there. So, I guess that's why they brought in the wine laws. So, second wine. This is Gulera Charella, it's called, Grand Reserve 2015. What's interesting about this? Well, it's got a very colourful label, which is kind of, I think this is quite distinctive. The thing about this is 2015 vintage. It's 100% Xarel-lo, and this is Bois de Superior, obviously Grand Reserve. It's from Val d'Onuix Foy, so that's one of the Contact of Barcelona sub-appellations, and this spends a whopping 96 months on lease. So this is a long, long time on lease. So that's, what's that, divided by 12, that's 8 and a bit years. Yeah, so.
Sorry, the number 3 again.
It's Masterclass. That was a different one.
This is we pour one bottle into the good, so we take it back and then we pour it again.
The one you just told me was a different one.
We tested before number 3. Yeah, this is second time testing number 3. With a different bottle.
It's musty.
That's it.
That's not good.
And then the third bottle. With this. Sorry, we'll come back to number 3.
So, just a deviation there from talking about when the wine's in good condition. So, this wine spends 96 months on lees, 100% Xarello. Dosage is like brut 8 grams a litre. That's interesting. So, in CAVA, generally speaking, there's a lot more brut nature wines than you might find in like Champagne. So, it's interesting. We haven't got any brut nature wines in this tasting, but when you go to the region, a lot of the wines have no dosage. So what we find here, we've got the combined effects of quite a bit of age. So this is 15, so it's like almost 9 years old. We've got a reasonably hefty dosage for CAVA at 8 grams a litre. So a little bit of sweetness there. And then we've got this lovely sort of Xarello character, which is slightly, there's a slight pithy bitterness I find to Xarello sometimes. It's got this kind of tangy, pithy quality. A little sour cherry maybe. But really distinctive. I think it's a very distinctive wine. What do people think? Any views on this?
Because of the Chardonnay.
Yes.
It's less toasty, it's like much more enjoyable than the first one. Does it have to do with the grape variety?
Yeah, so two
More
things.
delicate,
Yeah.
it's more
The
sour.
first one was very, very toasty.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that was the region, so Valencia, more than Messick, than anything else. It's a slightly warmer region. This one hasn't got that toastiness. It's got a long time on its lips, but it hasn't. You think, oh, does it take toasty? It's not. It's almost like a quite pure and clean.
Yeah, very smooth.
Yeah. So I think that's partly Xarello, which tends to stay quite linear and focused over time. That's why they like it for wines that are going to age a long time for things. But partly it's a slightly cooler climate. So what's the problem now? So unfortunately, the Mastinel, which is an interesting wine, a very interesting winery. If you ever get a chance to go to Villafranca, which is the main town in Penedès, there's a hotel, a winery called Mastinel, and the hotel is quite high end. But the way they've designed it is that they kind of, when you look at the outside, they've got these like, each of these rooms is like this circular glass, and it looks like stacked bottles of CAVA. So each of the rooms has this big circular window, and it's arranged in this sort of arrangement, so it looks like a cellar stack of CAVA bottles. And that's Mastinel. Really cool winery, really lovely hotel. Just out of town, you can probably walk into town. But the wines we had from them today, unfortunately, both bottles are
We have got 3 bottles.
corked. Just slightly corked. I mean, you can taste them, but it's like it's a must-do taste. It's that annoying bit of course, where it's not like so bad you have to reject it immediately, but it's bad enough that you don't feel you can put the wine in front of you because it's not the way the wine should taste. So what we're going to do is move on to the next one. And this is a really interesting project. I went there in October, Ventura, and this is the Grand Reserve of Brut 2019. Let's double check it's the same as the 10.
You can get it when it's really bad.
Yeah. So it's the Trésor Cuvée Barrique. So actually, to be honest, the technical sheet that I took this information from, I think was for a different wine. The picture's right, but the technical sheet I'm not sure was right. Can you help? Is this information correct? Oh, it is right. That's fine. That's good. So this is the Trésor Cuvée Barrique. So some of the Chardonnay, so 40% Chardonnay, 60% Xarel-lo. And some of the Chardonnay is barrel fermented, hence the name Cuvée Barrique. Other technical stuff, the juice yield is 520 litres a tonne. This is really interesting. So when you take a tonne of grapes and you press them, if you're pressing a tonne of white grapes, say for instance you're making machine harvested Sauvignon Blanc in Marlborough, you'd expect to get about 750 litres from that. 750, 780 litres. That's kind of your maximum juice yield because you've got skins and seeds and everything. And if you're pressing a whole bunch, you've got the stems as well. So the juice yield is how much juice you get out of a tonne of grapes. In Champagne, typically they'll take about 640 litres and they'll do it in 3 stages. This is actually, the juice yield is 520 litres per tonne. So what that means is you're pressing, but you're pressing quite gently and you're stopping at a certain point. Because I think when it comes to making traditional method sparkling, pressing is one of the critical stages. So, you know, if you press too much, you get phenolics, the pH goes up as you get the end of the pressings because you get potassium in the must, which increases the pH, which lowers the acidity. Generally speaking, there's a sweet spot of pressing when you're getting really high quality juice for making base wines traditional method sparkling. So this is a relatively low juice yield. So the goal here is to make very high quality wine. The wine sparkled 4.8 bars is the pressure in the bottle, the finished bottle. So Champagne you can go up to 6 bars, and this is a little bit lower. It changes the way that the mousse feels in the mouth a little bit if you go to lower pressure. TA, that's acidity is 7.34, so relatively high. It's brut, only just brut. Any less than 4 would be extra brut. So 4.5 grams a litre, 12% alcohol. So let's see what it's like. For me, this is like super refined, Grand Cru style CAVA. You taste this, blind, very hard to say what it is. I think that the treatment of the base wines, because I think there's 2 things you can do when you're making very high quality traditional sparkling. One is to pay a lot of attention to the base wines and get personality and character of the base wines. And the other is a very long time on these. They both do quite different things. And personally, I'm kind of moving towards more of a fan, being a fan of getting really high quality base wines, and maybe not having excessive time on these, but getting that personality and character of the base wines. And this wine's done. And I think that little bit of barrel fermentation for the Chardonnay I think has really helped, adding a little bit of richness. It rounds things out a bit and gives some complexity. I think this is really lovely.
What's the retail price?
Sorry?
The price? The retail price?
Retail price, does anybody know the retail price of this?
Yeah, about £20.
Thank you.
You You sell it.
Sorry.
You sell it.
Yeah, I'm selling
Who are
it.
you?
Who I am?
What's your?
Who are you?
So I'm working for Sheraton Grand, and we are attending the tasting, and I'm presenting the wines, and I wanted to listen to what Jamie had to say today.
Yeah, I came along.
So that's why
Was there
I'm
an
in the
October?
room.
Am I in good behaviour? Will the report? Mr. Ventura getting a good report. So my life might be okay if I go back to the minutes. Yeah, so really nice London wine, irrespective of the fact that the boss is in this. So let's move on to the next one. So this is Perolada in the Grand Claustro, a blend of, so no traditional Penedès grapes here. This is Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And the technical sheet was quite free of information. So we know that it's more than 30 months on lees and 11.5% alcohol. And bottled in this 2017 vintage, bottled in this bottle, which must make cellaring it pretty much impossible. You know, you've got a stacked bottle this shape. It's going to be complicated. And of course, this is the other thing to remember. If you're going to change your bottle shape and you're making high-end traditional method sparkling, you kind of need to plan like 5 years in advance. Because you change the bottle shape and it's another 5 years before it's on the market. So it's kind of interesting. And which is very interesting, because when the Armand de Brignac Ace of Spades came out, it's kind of like you're going, oh right, so you're releasing this in a distinctive gold bottle, like 3 months after you devised the project, because Rover upset you. And it's like, so you kind of, you work backwards, you find somebody must have had this wine cellar before for a number of years, because you can't just make a champagne and bring it to market like this. You know, you have to plan, if you've got a distinctive bottle, it has to be planned a number of years in advance. So you're smart, you can work out the producer who made this wine. So anyway, let's go back to CAVA.
Cordon, isn't it? You have the bottle shape. Just trying to find it. This one. It's probably excess of that.
And it's a really interesting discussion to think, you know, in terms of the region, when I say region, I always have to qualify that by saying the regions, but in terms of the DO, you know, what is the way forward? Is it to work with traditional local varieties, or are the imports, you know, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, very legitimate as well? And I think the answer is, it depends, and I think they've all got something to offer. But I'm a big fan of the traditional varieties.
But don't you have a bit of a war between those companies that actually like the Spanish grape varieties and those who actually prefer?
No, it's interesting. There's no real why.
No.
Everyone's looking to see what works best for
Yeah.
them. So you've got companies like Cordon,
Yeah.
who kind of were instrumental in bringing, for instance, Chardonnay
Chardonnay.
into the region. But they make wines with the traditional varieties, and I think everyone accepts there's a place for more.
But then Freshland is very much against it, and suddenly you've got this.
Yeah. But I think the impression I get in the region is that you don't get a lot of, it's not like a traditionalist versus modernist sort of battle. It's more like everyone's trying to find a way forwards, because, you know, according to what they're doing, where they are in the market. But I think this is really nice. This is
Lovely.
lovely personality.
Absolutely lovely.
What do people feel about this? Yeah, it's quite nice. It's very interesting. So a lot of the CAVAs tend to be around 11.5% alcohol, which is quite interesting because alcohol is quite an effect. We think it doesn't have much effect, but it does have an effect on flavour and texture. And I think sometimes you can tell that. So when it gets 12.5% versus 11.5%, move on to the final wine. So it's a Grand Reserva, and this is made from all 5 white varieties. So it's got Barolo, Macabeo, Torello, Chardonnay, and Malvasia. 4 grams per litre residual sugar, so it's extra brut. TA 5.9, so a little on the low side in acid, but not too low. And 36 months on lease, and the juice yield for this, so it was 500 litres per tub, so quite gentle pressing. What I love about this one is that sense of freshness and brightness. It's a sense of precision there. It's got that Torello character, that slightly pithy, nicely bitter quality that adds a freshness. Spend a reasonable time in this lease, so it's got a tiny bit of toastiness, but not too much. Really nice dynamic range. If you think about this, there's a bit of richness, but there's also freshness. It comes across as a very refreshing, brisk expression of colour. So any comments or questions on that? So, yeah.
Do you not think that using the champagne grapes, as you did for number 5, is a bit of a misnomer for CAVA when you're using the local grapes?
I think there is an identity issue, yes, for sure. And I think personally, if it was my job, I'd probably stick with the local varieties. But the fact is that the region has gone through areas where it's looking to become better known, and sometimes one way to become better known and more accepted by consumers is to use internationally known grapes. So I can understand why people did it, and the fact is they're planted there. So I think once they're planted there, people use them, that's kind of cool. But generally speaking, yeah, the identity is stronger if you have your own varieties. Is that the point? Yeah.
So the DO is open to any grape variety?
No, just the 5 whites and the 4 reds. And they're not looking to include any more.
So they're picking the champagne ones as well?
Well, they've been there for quite a while.
Oh yeah. Right.
I mean, the one thing in the region that's quite interesting that maybe will change the minds of people in the future is that one of the famous companies, Venedas Torres, have been looking at ancestral grape varieties. So back in I think it was the 90s, or was it the late 80s, they put adverts in local papers saying, do you know of any grapevines kind of like in your gardens or in the woods or anything that have kind of been abandoned? And they collected varieties, and they have in their vine conservancy, they've got about 50 different local Pinedas varieties, of which some have been commercially used now, and they've made them available to other people. So one of the famous ones is Forcada, white grape variety. Mainly for still wines, but you taste Forcada and you think, well, this could be really good for traditional method sparkling as well. So what they're looking for is, in the light of climate change, they're looking for varieties that got abandoned in the past because they were long cycles, so they took too long to ripen, which in the current climate might actually be an advantage. So this has been very interesting. So Pinedas has got a new set of varieties that are, they're proper, wine grape varieties that kind of got lost. And it may be in the future that the CAVA DO will include some of those ancestral varieties, but at the moment they're not looking for new varieties. I asked them about them last year. They said, look, they're quite happy with the ones they've got.
Yeah.
So then we have a journey through sort of like CAVA in just 5 wines. It turned out to be not 6, but I think we could have chosen many hundreds. There's a lot of really good things happening at the moment in the region. Lots of really good wines. There's diversity, there's stylistic diversity. It's a good time, I think. It's struggled in the past because of the image of making just cheap wines, but I think it's currently a very exciting time. Partly because there's so much renewed interest in sparkling wines globally. And I think CAVA has a place in it. Yes?
What do you think the future of CAVA could be like in the UK market, for example?
I think the future is kind of escaping the bottom end a little bit and kind of reasserting itself in that sort of nice sweet spot, sort of like in terms of retail price, like £10 to £20. Getting wines in that sweet spot that deliver quality, and that there are plenty of contenders that can do that. Because I think that the people have been kind of addicted to very cheap wine by the supermarkets and discounters. But it's not good because it's like they're going to get worse, those cheap wines, as the duties increase and everything, and then
you mentioned supermarkets, but we don't see Grand Reserva very often. We don't see the best of CAVA.
No, I think we just need to. It's almost like this is what's dragging the rest of the retail market down in the UK. So people are addicted to cheap wine.
Yeah.
Actually, they don't really enjoy that much, and they'd rather drink less and a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the future: is people drinking less and better, and going into that slightly higher price point where you can farm properly. That this is a wine region that's moving quickly to organics. It's going to be pretty much soon fully organic, the CAVA category, and that's really exciting. But it costs more money to farm. So if people pay a little bit more, we're going to get better quality.
I think we agree. I would love to see more reserves and great quality parts of the shelves. Do you think they can coexist with the sort of £6 and CAVAs that we should probably see? Is there a case for it?
I think there are some really nice very cheap CAVAs. Yeah, they're quite delicious. They're uncomplicated and they deliver pleasure. That's good. I think it would be nice for consumers to have a way of distinguishing them a little bit more clearly. At the moment, you've got that consumers have to learn about Guarda Superior. That's quite a. It's not a totally clear cue for buying. So maybe price is the way to do this. They're going to get wines at £7 or £8. They know that it's going to be different to what was at £15.
I think CAVA's great. I'm being a fan of Spain and of CAVA as well anyway. Yeah. It's all priced.
Hopefully in time the categories will be robust buying cues. So Grand Reserva will give you a certain level of quality that you can kind of rely on. So if you're buying blind, like even as wine professionals, I go into a restaurant or a shop, I don't know all the wines and all the brands. So often you're looking for a buying cue, and that's where these labels come on. So I think certainly if I was going to buy a CAVA sight unseen, the Elaborador Integral would be a really big buying cue for me because the producer's doing everything, right? So that would be like, and actually the problem is I know all the 14 already, but when it grows a bit more, that's going to be a big cue if you didn't know the producer. And then maybe Grand Reserva. That would be a good buying cue as well. And obviously if you see Parahay Calificada, then that's, when you can afford it, that's going to be a very good cue as well.
You've chosen not to use a rosé.
Then it's 6 wines. Yeah, it would be nice to put a rosé in. 6 wines, I've chosen so many. Okay, no more questions. Then I want to thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoy the wines. And look out.